Hi everyone, I'm Melanie. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in July. July was a pretty big reading month for me. I went on a trip and I had a lot of time to read some books, so I'm excited to get into everything. Surprisingly, this month I read a lot of distressing and creepy books. There's only really one book that doesn't fall under that category, so it's a pretty interesting month. Lots of horror or horror adjacent or sad things. So I will start chronologically with the first book that I read, and that is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This book I picked up a while ago and read a couple chapters and put down because I just wasn't in the right mind space for how kind of depressing this book is, but I finally was able to pick it up and get through it. And honestly, it took me a few hundred pages, I would say, to really get into this and like fully immerse myself in this world that she built in the future kind of now. But I definitely started to feel like it was picking up and I really started enjoying the characters, though she did write some frustrating characters and I understand why she wrote them that way, so I can't fault her for that, but it was kind of hard to read sometimes. I did really enjoy our main character Lauren, even enjoyed the religion aspect to this book, which I don't typically enjoy, but I think the way she did it in this book, I'm not going to spoil anything, but kind of made sense to me, and I think that's the point. So it was very interesting in that aspect. Just also very depressing and bleak, and a lot of messed up shit happens in this. And it's not fun to read, I would say, but it's very interesting to see what she kind of predicted and how close she got to where we are in our current like political climate and everything. So I'm excited to continue on to the next book in this series. This book is written in journal format, started in 2004 but covers many years, and it's set around a family who lives in an enclosed kind of gated community that is actually walled off from the rest of the city, where there's a lot of poor people, a lot of people scavenging, a lot of crime. In this world, it's very hard to stay survived in sort of this type of community, and water prices are insane and kind of the quality of living is very difficult. So we follow this family struggling to keep their neighborhood together, all the people involved safe, and yeah, I'm not going to say anything more, but very interesting concept. So I already really liked Kindred, so I was expecting to like this, though this is very different, so I'm curious to see where the next one goes. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. The next book, or rather short story, that I read is one I've been meaning to read, is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This one has been recommended by some of my favorite YouTubers, and I've been meaning to get to it because it is very short. It's only around 20 pages, but it is very impactful. This one is about a woman in the late 1800s who is brought on a kind of getaway by her husband to help her mentally. She is starting to kind of slowly fade into insanity, and it's kind of shown through her obsession with this yellow wallpaper in her room. It's very well written, very interesting, in the ending kind of packs a punch, and there's ways to interpret it very differently, which I really liked. So I love this. I gave this 5 stars. The next book I kind of threw in there on a whim. I saw it available on Kindle Unlimited, so I decided to kind of pick it up while I was in between books. And I'd heard about this short story collection being talked about before, and that is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. I honestly didn't know much going into this, but I expected it to be kind of weird literature in short story forms, and boy was that correct. This book actually encapsulates a lot of different types of genres, but I would say a lot of them are more on the horror spooky end of things, but I kind of gave each story my own rating. The first story of this is actually one of the most disgusting pieces of literature I've ever read, so please tread carefully with that one. It was kind of very hard for me to read, though I did get through it, but I gave that one 2.5 stars. Let's see, what else did I wrote a couple words down for each story based on what I felt at the time when I gave them the rating. So the first one, entitled The Head, I gave 2.5 stars and said, so gross. The second one, The Embodiment, 3.5 stars, and I wrote down interesting concept. Cursed Bunny is 5 stars. Wow, the twist was beautiful. And I do remember that one, and it's the title one, so it makes sense. The Frozen Finger, I gave 4.5 stars, and I wrote spooky. The Snare, I gave 4 stars. It said fucked up Rumpelstiltskin. That can give you a sense of what that story's like. Goodbye My Love was 3 stars. I said it was okay. Scars, it was 2 stars. It was too long and kind of boring for me. Home Sweet Home was 3.5 stars. I said nice twist. And Ruler of the Winds and Sands, I gave 4 stars. I wrote cute and fantasy. And then lastly, Reunion, I gave 4 stars and I wrote sad. So that is that book. Averaged around 3.6 stars, so I rounded up to 4, because overall I thought the collection was very interesting and covered a lot of different genres, so highly recommend if you like weird, creepy, grotesque, distressing things. This next book that I read, I've been wanting to read for a very long time, and it took me forever to find it in stores for some reason, and that is Survivor by Chuck Palahniuk. This one, after finishing, it actually took me time. I needed to think about how I really felt about this book, because there's just so much was going on, and it was a very interesting writing style that it took me a little longer to get used to than I expected, but not in like a bad way. I was just, you know, the story structure was unique in this one, which I usually really like, and I did like, but it just took me a little longer to get used to. This book is a wild ride. I did not expect where this is going. It's basically, the main character is basically the worst. So a lot of crazy stuff happens, like he does a lot of awful things, but it's about a man named Tender Branson who is part of a Creedish death cult who is telling his life story as he's sailing over the ocean to the Australian outback in order to crash his plane and kill himself. So that concept in itself is what brought me to this book, and I thought that would be really intriguing, and boy was his life very fucked up and kind of insane, but the characters were so interesting and it was hard to hate him so much. So I don't know how I feel about the main character, but the characters around him were very interesting, and I think it was a very well written book. I still honestly don't really know how I feel about this book, but if you like kind of characters you're meant to not like, or that just do awful, crazy things throughout their life, like by choice most of the time, this is your book. I'd say it's a very uniquely told story about a very unique life. And I would say the ending third of this book was like really good, so that's what sold me the most on it. And I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. The next book I read is my first Stephen King book ever, and that is Pet Sematary. I was very excited to finally read something from him, though it is one of his earlier ones, and I was told by my boyfriend that I might cringe at some of the rating and the way he rates women sometimes, which was true, but apparently he's improved since then, so I'll forgive him, I guess. This is also another very distressing book that I picked up. This is apparently one of his darkest books, and I understand why, but I also was kind of surprised it wasn't as dark as I expected. This book definitely took me around 100 pages to like fully immerse myself in and get used to again, but I really liked the atmosphere that this like house and the town was in, and the people and the characters were really well written, and you really understood kind of the internal conflict and struggles that they're going through and all the trauma that they've had in their past. So I think that was really well written. I definitely think how it ended was the best part, and nothing was really surprising. I wouldn't say there's any really big twists in this book, because he kind of does that writing style where they spoil that something is going to happen at some point in the future before it happens, which I'm not sure if I would have preferred it the other way or this way. I didn't hate it, and wouldn't say I loved it, but I guess I don't really have a strong opinion on that kind of style. I'm also reading a book right now that does that. And it's just an interesting choice, I would say, especially for a horror book. I still want to read a few more things from Stephen King before I make my full decision on whether he is an author for me moving forward. But I definitely want to give him more chances, because I did really enjoy this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book I read was while I was on vacation. It was the first book that I picked up on the plane, and that is The Song of Six Realms by Judy I. Lin. This book is about a girl named Shu who is orphaned at a young age and then sold to an entertainment house to learn how to entertain and bring up that lifestyle. So she learns the Qin at a very early age and is very talented in it. And then one day when she is first introduced into the actual work of the entertainment house, she's caught the eye of a young lord who then wants to hire her to play in his mansion. So Shu signs a 3-year contract with him to play in his mansion, and then as she enters the mansion, she encounters things that are not as they seem. There's things that are attacking her that don't look real or like things she's seen before. So she's kind of thrown into the world of the Six Realms. This is one of the books that I picked up on my quest to find a book that makes me feel like all the Chinese Korean dramas that I watch. This one was specifically Shansha focused, based on Chinese mythological fantasy characters. So again, because this is YA, I feel like things weren't as developed as they could be, as like more dark as they could be. I think that's my biggest issue. I just need to stay away from YA Asian inspired fantasy, but that's mostly what they are written, which is kind of annoying to me. So please, if you have any recommendations for adult versions, like send them my way. I will try them out. But for me, the relationship didn't really develop in a normal way to me. It just kind of happened fast, or just they didn't give it the time it needed, so I didn't really feel for the characters that much, and it didn't feel like there was enough tension built between the conflicts before the conflicts happened. So that is my one gripe with this book. It was a very beautiful world and I loved the writing style, but I do think more time should have been given to kind of hone the story and tension a little more. I did give this 3.5 stars. The next book I picked up in Botswana for my Read Around the World female authors for Botswana, and that is A Question of Power by Bessie Head. So Bessie Head is technically born in South Africa, but was later exiled to Botswana, where she lived out her life as a school teacher. And so this is kind of semi-autobiographical about her life in Botswana and her kind of mental health issues and kind of struggle with her sanity. So this follows a woman named Elizabeth who is living in Botswana now, kind of isolated. She has a child and she is basically struggling through going insane while also trying to live her everyday life. And this book is very hard to read, and not the content subject matter, I mean kind of, but the way it's written is very confusing. So it took me a while to like understand how to read this book, because it starts out where you're basically reading her hallucinations in her dreams, so they kind of don't make sense at all. But later off, I promise it does get back to normal. So I was making sure, I was reading enough to make sure that it had an actual plot, which it does, and it's very interesting in the way it's written, and I think it is powerful in some ways, but it's also very complex, I will say. So bear that in mind if you're curious, but it's very impactful, and it was very, very interesting to read a book based in Botswana while I was in Botswana. I learned a lot about the culture and how people lived there and the struggle of being mixed race at that time in like South Africa as well as Botswana. And so very, very interesting. And I want to read, I think, something else from her. I'm very curious. I know this was probably the most complicated book of hers that I picked up, so I'm very curious to read something else. This book covers topics of sex, politics, racism, and good versus evil, so it's very interesting commentary on what she believed at the time and the blurred lines between a lot of these things, so I'll end up giving this 4 stars. The next book I read is Even If This Love Disappears Tonight by Masaki Ichijo. This one was definitely a breath of fresh air after reading all of my distressing books, though this does take a sort of distressing turn at some point, but I'm not trying not to spoil anything, but the theme is distressing for this month, so I'll throw that in there. But this is a very sweet, like, sentimental, emotional story about these young teens going through love, struggling with connection with each other and their families. And it's about a boy named Toru who ends up on a dare asking a girl out, who gives him 3 conditions in which he has to follow if he does want to go out with her. And that is, don't talk to her until after school, keep all communication between them short, and don't truly fall in love with her. So he agrees to all of these, and they start a fake relationship, and this story follows them kind of figuring out their feelings, and it's just a very beautiful, well written. It's a light novel, so it's kind of the YA Japanese equivalent, but very sweet and very heartwarming. So I highly recommend if you like kind of Your Name-esque, I would say, if you know that anime. So I really enjoyed this, and it was a nice relief from all the horror that I've been reading. So I definitely want to continue. I know there's another book in this series, so highly recommend. So I did end up giving this one 5 stars. The last full book that I read on my trip was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This one I could not put down. I loved every second of this book, and I thought it was so uniquely written. The concept was so interesting. This book is about Leah and Miri, who are married. We follow both of their POVs at different time frames of their story. Leah is a marine biologist who is on an expedition on a submarine when it starts sinking to the seafloor. And then Miri's POV is after the expedition, when Leah comes back and dealing with what the effects of that expedition left on Leah. So it's a lot about like grief and grieving for someone who is still there but not really there. Very well written, and it was obviously distressing. I think the Leah's perspective was so compelling, even though not so much happened. And I love the kind of sort of magical realism aspects to this book, and the ending was flawless, and I absolutely adore this. So I gave this one 5 stars as well. So I had a good ending to my trip in terms of reads, but highly recommend. I would consider this a weird book, and yeah, I'm very happy I finally picked this up, because I was on the fence about this one, but no, I'm glad. And then I did end up reading one story from Tales from the Cafe, which is the 5th book that I decided to bring on the trip with me, and this was on my last flight from Dallas to LA. So I read the first story, and I was sobbing on the plane, and I was in a middle seat, so it was very hard trying not to like make a big scene about it, but I definitely enjoyed that one, and I'm excited to continue on with the rest of this book. So that wraps up my month of July. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these books, and I look forward to telling you about August. Thank you for watching. Bye.